are back with some more quarterfinal matches here. I'm Raven, and joining me is Sottle, and we have, quite frankly, maybe my favorite match of the day, just in terms of players. Bunnyhopper versus Ike. I think together they have the most, I would say, respect and support across the community.
Yeah, and for their respective regions as well. I think Bunnyhopper has really marched to the forefront of the European scene recently alongside Hunter Ace based on his achievements. You know, Hunter Ace has been getting it done in all the tour stop level events and really built up a legacy for himself there as the points leader and just the overall most consistent player. But when it's come to serious business time, it's been Bunnyhopper who's been turning it on. So he really is in with the shout being best player in Europe. And Ike, again, similar thing. He doesn't make it to all the events out there. He's not grinding together all the points that the likes of Just Saying has. But when it comes down to a big event, like we mentioned before, that undefeated run through DreamHack that got him really on everyone's map, and now the run through playoffs, and now finding himself just a single game away from the World Championship.
Right, yeah, everything on the line here for Ike. Obviously, Bunnyhopper already qualified, but still, you know, as Dan and Kibler were just talking about, it's still all up in the air. Even if Ike loses this match, it doesn't mean he is necessarily out. And what a kind of cushion that must be for these players who aren't already qualified.
Yeah.
It's the highest EV championship you can ever be in right now, because you almost get, it's almost like top 8 becomes a double elimination again.
Yeah, in a weird way, yeah. And it's, if you're sat at home thinking, wow, I'm a fan of both these players, they're both incredible, you know, I've been following them both for a long time, who do I want to root for? Well, if you're just a fan of good Hearthstone, root for Bunnyhopper, because the more players who have already qualified for Worlds that get through into these top 4 spots today, the more tiebreakers we have to play tomorrow. So that means you just get to watch more good Hearthstone, and that's a win for everyone.
It definitely is, and that's one of the reasons I'm very excited for this match. Bunnyhopper versus Ike. Ike on the Hunter, and Bunnyhopper on this Rogue. And it is similar to a Rogue we've seen a little bit earlier. I guess like Pirate Miracle, Pirate Tempo, Pirate stuff, raiding party things is the deck. I just think like Pirate Miracle's a fine description for that deck.
Okay. I'm not fully sold. I did internally wince a little bit when earlier TJ said, so yeah, it's I kind of like relate it to Miracle Rogue, except it doesn't play Gadgetzan Auctioneer.
Well, it kind of does. Raiding party.
Yeah. Because the Myra's Unstable Element is the big miracle part of it, I guess, in combination with the potential of those Faldori Striders as well that can make insane things happen in combinations with each other. I remember, speaking of kind of related to Ike, Gallon, a good friend of Ike's and a practice partner, we one day just built a deck based around that concept, and the very first game we had prep Myras on 2 into Coin Spider. So we had all of our spiders in an empty deck, won the game on turn 4. It was beautiful.
That sounds pretty good to me. You can see some of the cards that we were talking about here with the Shadow Blade. I think is just a weapon that's just very powerful, that has kind of flown under the radar for a very, very long time. This is not a new card to Hearthstone. This has been knocking around for a very long time. But now especially I think it's powerful because the 3 attack and not taking any damage yourself, it almost acts like a heal as well as removal.
Right, and it's something that Rogue does struggle with, where because of the nerf to Cold Blood, Rogue is now forced to go later in games more often. You know, Cold Blood is a card that ends the game quickly. You take that away, it means that games that were going to end on turn 6 or turn 7 are now being stretched to 8, 9, 10 and beyond. And if that's going to happen, Rogues very often find themselves in a position where their greatest tempo tool, the efficiency of their hero power, they end up just beating themselves to death. They take too much blowback to go to rewind in the old Hearthstone cabinet of memes. So having a weapon that you can equip and essentially have that candle shot effect of being able to ping things off without taking damage, that can help Rogues stretch out just a little bit longer and then get value out of things like Myra's Unstable Element.
Yeah, we can see on the bottom of the screen there, the game win rate, incredibly impressive. We don't just talk up Bunnyhopper for the fun of it. He delivers on all of these assumptions, and you know, the garners the level of respect that he has from the Hearthstone community.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't really know why we're bothering to play out the rest of this World Championship circuit, because Blizzard already messed up and released Bunnyhopper's World Championship winning card early. We already saw Pogo Hopper came out. It was in the wrong set. They made a mistake, and they've covered it up so well that no one except me seems to have noticed. But we already know Bunnyhopper is winning.
That's true. I can't really argue with the results at this point. And I agree with it. He is winning in this game right now as well because the coin backstab Van Cleef just to create that turn 2 6-6 is such a nightmare. But Ike now has a second go of it with the Razor Maw if he really wants, just to try and get the poison on that Diamol. First Razor Maw wasn't great, just ended up with Divine Shield.
Yeah.
But the poison would be huge just to remove the huge tempo gain that Bunnyhopper's gained.
This tracking is going to perhaps pan out a little bit awkwardly for Ike. I do like that he went for the Spring Pour here. Just he's behind right now. He needs to catch up on tempo, so he needs the immediacy of a card like Spring Pour. Master's Call seemed mediocre, being that he already had one in his hand. And then the last option was Savannah Highmane, and this is a interaction that many people really won't have experienced because it's kind of an old school thing in Hearthstone, but there used to be a very, very real interaction between Savannah Highmane and the card Sap in the metagame. And it was, you know, Amar's had his Highmane lore, which was if a Highmane connects face, you win the game. But the inverse of that was true in the Rogue matchup as well, whereas if you played a Highmane and it got sapped, you lost the game. Right. So Highmane here against this Sap deck from Bunnyhopper is going to be a scary thing to deliberately take off a tracking. So Spring Pour probably ends up being the correct choice there.
Yeah, I will have to agree with that one. And it's generally how this Rogue deck plays, actually, is it's not going to do anything incredibly crazy in one given turn, but it creates opportunities for high levels of burst damage, slightly negated by the Cold Blood nerf, of course, but still you look at weapons can be buffed. You can have high damage swings multiple turns in a row. You still have minions that gain a quite high attack value and can push a lot of damage. And then, as you said, with Saps, with a potential Vile Spine as well, there is very easy removal for Bunnyhopper to apply. Just to say, oh, is this one minion going to cause? Nope, go away. Right. And then keep pushing that damage. And Hunter can't take those hits for that long.
I was saying, after going through all that rigmarole, it doesn't actually look like that bad of a Sap turn right now. Bunnyhopper doesn't have any other play, really, that creates him a board test that board state that remains uncontested. He had Henchclan Thug and trade, but his Henchclan Thug would be challenged on board by whatever other minion remained. So I do like the usage of the Sap there, and he just needs a little bit of help from the remainder of his deck, but doesn't find it picking up the Leroy. Now Ike has managed to turn the corner, and I have to admit, I haven't personally played a great deal of this version of Rogue, but from what I've seen from it being played in this tournament so far, I remain very unimpressed with it.
So it was way better with Cold Blood. I'll tell you that for free.
Color me surprised.
High-level analysis, as always, on my side of the desk, of course. But what I will say is the decision to use the backstab earlier and go that one extra bit bigger on the Van Cleef has had an impact because Bunnyhopper can't reactivate the full effect of Raiding Party now. And Raiding Party is such a high impact card in every single matchup with this deck because not only do you draw cards with it, you draw cards that work together.
Yes.
The weapon with Dread Corsair gets cheaper, Deckhand can be charged and provide some damage, the weaker of the two. Greenskin buffs the weapon to a 4-3 potentially, depending on when you swing it. So having that be able to combo off consistently enables such a high win rate with this deck, and not having it available right now, you see the weak level of play Bunnyhopper has to make.
Yeah, what I will say on the balance to that is Bunnyhopper going 6-6 with his Edwin as opposed to just the 4-4 has worked to his benefit as well because, for example, Ike landed a Crackling Razor Maw buff on a 1-3, making it a 4-3 with a +3 attack, and it wasn't able to just immediately challenge the Edwin Van Cleef. So yes, the game would have been very different in both directions, but it's definitely a big decision point to look at.
Now Ike's just going to start filling up this board and trying to just get ahead in this way. He does have Rexar as an emergency if he needs it, but I think most importantly, he has Master's Call, which the second you're giving any breathing room, and sometimes when you've not got it, Master's Call is the card that digs you out of some trouble.
Most importantly, Bunnyhopper just has a big old steaming vat of nothing right now.
Right.
Nothing steam.
We're going sciencey. Most things can't steam, right?
Sure.
It's because it's the water that steams.
What?
Is that correct?
I mean, steam is liquid evaporating and taking gaseous form.
Right. So I mean, most things aren't liquid.
Sure.
Right. So.
Okay.
Science. I think Bunnyhopper might just have to just play Raiding Party and deal with it, you know, and have an unfun turn.
Just deal with it.
No, I think this is correct because you might have a bad draw next turn too, you know what I mean? Like, you have to at least get something to play.
Right, so the problem with this, though, is that the thing his hand is really missing to unlock it and make it powerful is the Shadow Blade. He needs to draw the weapon, and without comboing the effect of the raiding party, he ends up without the weapon anyway, so the rest of his hand is just still kind of mediocre.
I think he can play for a bit of a late game, though, because it was likely that he drew a deck hand from that raiding party, which then combos with his next raiding party, and then you start to just blow up onto the board, especially when you consider Dread Corsairs become 1 mana 3/3 taunts at that point once you've got the weapon equipped. So I think the raiding party there was correct. A 4 mana 3/3 pass turn was, I think, a lot worse and a lot more heavily punished.
Right. Well, he would have had Dagger plus 3/3, right? He still could have got that off the combination.
Yeah, sure.
He would have killed the 1/1 and there would have been a 3/3 on board instead of these 2 extra cards in hand. It's a very simple difference.
But I think now Bunnyhopper's just trying to activate this second raiding party properly.
Yeah.
And then weapon, dread, green skin. You know that weapon, green screen. Green squin? It's too much time hanging around you this week. You've been messing up some... Profit Melon. There you go. So I think that would have been a long-term plan that could maybe get it done and just have one big, powerful tempo turn. But Bunnyhopper's decided to just buff up this dagger and start chipping away. Oh, look at it. It's Dire Frenzy into Master's Call. It's so powerful. 1 mana 4/6 beast.
Ike just continuing to play his thing, so they're in play.
Genius.
It really is. It sounds simple.
Well, I was just going to ask, do you even trade at this point? I will bat you over a 0 fan of knives in this list.
Yeah, I don't actually see the point the more that I look at it. Ike eventually agrees, does just shit the damage to face.
Well, I'm just staring at a Tundra Rhino and a Hyena in hand next turn, so this game could be over very, very quickly.
And that's a big reason why these Spring Paws and Lynxes were preloaded, aside from the fact that then they're in play, is that it allocates the mana this turn so that Tundra Rhino, Scavenging Hyena can just be freely paid on the next turn, and he has all of these tools to be able to trade away and make the Hyena huge. And
this is where I was wondering, in terms of the turn I talked about a little bit earlier, when the Eviscerate was drawn, was Eviscerate Raiding Party a turn, and then this past turn would have been the big double Dread Corsair weapon to kill something, hopefully, and so on. You know, was that a different route that could have been taken that might have been enough to hold on?
Yeah, it sounds in my head like he's still just very dead in that world with the, because the trades are there to go through the taunts anyway with the Hyena getting buffed all the way along, so not sure how much of a difference it would have made. As it stands, with the Valspine Slayer here, he's made a decent defensive play and got a lot of stats on board to contest.
Well, you already start to see why this deck is so powerful, right? Imagine he did get a Shadow Blade, then there's Evis, Shadow Blade, Leroy, he would have played the other Corsair. And suddenly there goes half of Ike's health in one turn.
Right. If this was 9 damage, it was a very simple decision.
Yeah.
The fact that it's 8, it's still quite a simple decision, but Ike's going to have a pretty long think about it, I think.
I think it's just as simple.
Yeah.
2 hero powers when Ike's at 29 health is close enough to 1 to make me happy.
Especially with no Cold Blood.
Exactly.
That is the card historically against Rogue that punishes you for trying to race. It's Cold Blood. It's Cold Blood Sap, Cold Blood Eviscerate, Cold Blood Valspine Slayer. Some way to just swing the board and make huge damage. Cold Blood is very much the key ingredient in
Pre-nerf, there were often times where I've played this deck and I've had like a minion on board. Say, call it this bot, and you just 30 someone, and they're just dead, and that's just game. So yeah, the removal of Cold Blood is extremely important. This raiding party finally having its combo effect will enable a 3 attack with 0 damage taken, as well as a deck hand to be used as a flex spot, or more realistically, the Dread Corsair as just an extra speed bump.
Blood and plunder.
But Bunnyhopper still just has 2 turns. But he does have, look at that. Leroy, Evis, deck hand in hand. That's just too many.
Oh, the Hunter's Mark draw activates the Rexar, puts Bunnyhopper out of his misery 1 turn earlier. Did have, what was he looking at? 8, 11, 12 damage in play with Leroy 18, 21, 25. He actually did set up a counter lethal for
so
himself
sick.
there with the deckhands Eviscerates and Leroy's that he had in hand. So that could have turned out to be a pretty crucial draw for Ike to get that Hunter's Mark to push through lethal. Bunnyhopper made the greedy play, which wasn't really greedy, it was just correct, of leaving the minion up so he could set up lethal for himself, pushing face. That gave Ike outs, but if he'd have traded with the minion, yes, Ike would have had less outs for immediate lethal, but he would have had guaranteed 2-turn lethal. Bunnyhopper made a play that loses more in the short term so that he can win more often over the course of 2 turns as opposed to 0%.
Yeah, 100% on that one, and it's definitely one of those games I'd love if we could just rewind time and Bunnyhopper saved the backstab and said, well, actually, I'm going to get the raiding party, slightly smaller Van Cleef, easier dealt with from Ike, but then what happens when there's just more resources and a weapon involved, most importantly? That was a pretty explosive game number 1, and it goes to Ike, but still plenty more games to play out for this series. It's Ike versus Bunnyhopper, and we'll be right back at the conclusion. To the HCT Winter Championship. This has been a true marathon for these players as we are on day number 3. And this is Ike versus Bunnyhopper. Ike taking a pretty nice win with that Hunter over the Rogue, but you could have seen how it could have easily gone the other way. And if you're not used to that Rogue deck, you see or can understand the potential power level.
Yes,
No? He set up lethal out of nowhere.
I know, but he did lose the game. You know, when you're playing an aggro mirror, literally the goal to win that matchup is to kill your opponent 1 turn before they kill you, right? And Ike did that. So I don't buy into the idea of it being close. He lost. That's how aggro mirrors work when it comes down to it.
You either win or you lose.
It's
Thanks,
true.
Sol.
I mean, in an aggro mirror, it can look very, very close because it's that fine-tuned. But personally, I still remain very, very unimpressed with that Rogue deck.
Okay, I'm just saying we live in a world where any of those later draws or mid-game draws was a 1-drop or a 2-drop that could have activated Raiding Party. The game looks a little bit different. But anyway, we won't live in the past, we live in the now.
Raven, sometimes you just got to let 5 be an even number.
That was a great phrase. I wish I'd learned that a long time ago to help dealing with you.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
like, Sol, 5's just even now, be quiet.
I thought that.
Okay.
Bunny and I are just diametrically opposed. I will never let 5 be an even number. That sounds awful.
7?
That just sounds like throwing all ancient and modern mathematics out the window and starting again. There would be chaos.
Sounds like what I do in most casts, to be honest. But there we go. It's going to be the Priest versus the Hunter, and I feel like this is almost a meta staple matchup at this point.
Yeah.
If you're playing ladder and you play one of these decks, you need to know how to beat the other one because you will face it fairly often.
And Ike is packing the build of the deck that has just that little bit more game in this matchup, and that game is highlighted front and center and far left of his hand at the moment. Those 2 Witchwood Grizzlies just make all the difference. I believe he's the only player to be bringing Grizzlies in his Xerix Priest in this tournament. It's the build of the deck that I personally favor. Just playing a kind of smoother minion curve, getting things out there, and then just using resurrections to dominate board. And when he said that he has never really executed the combo kill, there was obviously a certain amount of him being facetious. I'm sure he has definitely done it at some point before he did it twice in this tournament. But the philosophy of what he's saying is that his build of the deck plays very different stylistically. It plays minions, it dominates the board, it starves the opponent out of resources, and it just wins through stats and attrition more often than it does through burn damage.
Right, and on the other side of the board here, Bunnyhopper, unlike many of the players who have brought Hunter to this tournament, is bringing just an extremely standard list. There are no hatchets, there are candle shots, there are no baited arrows, for example. It's just extremely straightforward. All the minions you're used to seeing on ladder, and in general, is what Bunnyhopper's got to work with here. And an early Dire Frenzy is, I feel, pretty good in this matchup specifically. Get the pig. Just continue to, even though I've cast Bunnyhopper for a very long time right now, do you see any other play that is an Animal Companion this turn? Like,
I've cast Bunnyhopper for a very long time, and that was just this one game.
This one turn at this point. There we go. He did get the pig. I am a ball prophet.
I think he was thinking of, because he's intending to Die Frenzy on the following turn, most likely, There's some merit to saying that you're going to get the Dire Frenzy down on a cheaper minion, so maybe you'd rather Dire Frenzy a Timberwolf, so you're then drawing that, that +3/+3 buff is then only costing you 1 mana when it comes out of your deck. It's more tempo each time you end up playing it. That's the only consideration that I can make for not playing Animal Companion.
Usually it's me who's reaching here, Saul, but I think the potential Dire Frenzy on an unanswerable Animal Companion is extremely powerful, regardless of which one you roll.
I completely agree.
But at this point, I will say that I'm just feeling that get the +3/+3, start hitting them in the face, and who knows, one Master's Call or one just regular draw later, you are pound on a lot of pressure for not a lot of resource.
Yep, a lot of pressure is what he's going to need, though, because he's going to have to plow through Grizzly number 1, Grizzly number 2, and has to be, Ike is hoping, some resurrections coming out in the near future to help bring these back as the full fat 312 version. This is a semi-skimmed Grizzly right now.
I will say, though, looking at this hand, he has the Spellstone, and on top of that, Scream, Mass Hysteria, and he's even almost certainly got the time to just drop down Lyra. Just sneak it in there, because I don't think he's under too much threat from what we could see on Bunnyhopper's side. So this is looking mighty fine for Ike as far as I'm concerned.
Yep, and you can see straight away, what is it that's giving him the freedom? What's giving him the time to get to those Psychic Scream turns? What's giving him the freedom to just drop a Lyra later in the game when he needs to? It's the fact that he's putting 2 Witchwood Grizzlies in his deck, and yeah, he drew them both. Call that luck if you want, but he clicked on them and put them in his deck before he even got to this tournament, and many other players have not done that.
Right. Just to get through the first one without much to do.
Oh, the Mass Hysteria second one makes this a pretty comfortable decision, I think, from my perspective. Perhaps using your only Mass Hysteria on there might just hold you back a little bit, but you still have the Psychic Scream to fall back on. But with double Hysteria Psychic Scream in hand, I think that's a very simple decision.
I think it looks like, for me, though, Bunnyhopper's just drawn probably the best draw in the that turn.
Yeah.
One single minion is actually more powerful often than a couple of smaller ones against this deck. But again, it's just the more Bunnyhoppers use his resources, the more it's giving Ike even more freedom to just drop the bear and be quite confident about it sticking around. Question time.
I think I might know what you're going to ask, but go on.
Okay, answer it.
Was it not just a yes or no question?
Okay, answer it with enough explanation for me to know what you're answering.
Is it to do with potentially casting Spellstone next turn?
No.
Okay.
I thought we knew each other.
All right, fair enough.
I was wondering whether there was ever the wiggle room to play Lyra that turn.
What? No, I mean, so no, that is the question. Because if you play Lyra that turn, you then curve into Spellstone, because your Spellstone then resurrects 2 minions, because you've played 2 different minions over the course of the game. I think that is the argument for playing Lyra that turn.
You do know me well, Saul.
See, I knew what you were going to ask. I told you. You just weren't smart enough to consider all the implications of your own question.
Not my job.
No, it's true, it's not.
But yeah, I was just wondering, right? Because as you quite rightly pointed out, the Spellstone becomes more powerful. There is still Psychic Scream. There is still Mass Hysteria.
Yep.
And having a free Lyra that sits beside your resurrected Grizzly is as safe as it's ever going to get, to be completely honest. And we've seen many games in matchups like this. One buffed Spirit Lash, and the game's just ends effectively. Wouldn't be too shocked at just getting the Psychic Scream down now. The following turns do open up capabilities of Mass Hysteria and then an Elemental now it's been drawn, or just dropping Lyra and then working into something a little bit later on. But if I am Ike, I am not happy leaving these minions on the board.
And maybe this is why he did end up going down that Grizzly line, because he felt like he was going to Psychic Scream on 7 and not Spellstone on 7, which does then make a lot of sense. You could potentially wait, get a little bit greedier with the Spellstone, give yourself a few extra draws in the meantime just to find Eternal Servitudes.
I was actually going down the line of presuming you were going to Psychic Scream, and it's just when you do Spellstone, it's more powerful, and you can get away with investing the 5 mana then, but I would struggle. It would create insane levels of, I'm going to choose the word discipline, to not scream and want to try and do something else. The one thing to bear in mind is Mass Hysteria does kill off the 2 initial boards.
I was just looking at that.
2 initial minions on the board, sorry, and then there are
Hysteria,
just 2/2/2s.
Hysteria, Radiant Elemental Heal. I was just looking at that as you were talking about the Psychic Scream.
Yeah, a world in which that high main doesn't die, you always have to scream. It's just too much damage. I think Hyena with Timberwolf, 1 trade seems good. I don't think you ever want to leave the Elemental on the board because of the potential shenanigans that can happen, especially going into turn 8, which makes Clone cost 8 with the Elemental. We've seen some things happen there. But it looks like Bunnyhopper's just going to get Rexar down and just say, actually, it's as smooth a Rexar turn as possible. I already have the 1 charge of Candle Shot to finish the Elemental off. He saves one of the Hyenas and pushes a little bit more damage. For me, just feels a little bit weird saving minions to push damage and then using 6 mana to get a hero power and a hero that doesn't do much else. Early on.
I imagine he's looking to build big here, though, because he has so much cheap stuff in his hand, which that mentality is borne out by the fact he went first pick Life Drinker, but then being offered Snowflipper Penguin second pick, you can kind of divert your thinking about, because Snowflipper Penguin is just always value when it's second pick.
Yeah, the only thing I really wish you could do with this hero power is choose the artwork that is used, not always the first one. Because I'd always pick Snowflipper Penguin.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely just, especially with that Life Drinker now, there is just a lot of damage from hand.
Yes.
At this point. The 1 mana Timberwolf often acts like a kill command in this deck. It's actually kind of silly.
Ike stops, thinks, considers, spends all of his mana playing minions.
Seems reasonable. It's starting to run a little bit dry though, and already you see that Timberwolf effectively being a 1 mana 1/1 deal too, and it's just too much with the Life Drinker. And again, just the damage from hand was the biggest deal there in the world, and Bunnyhopper is going to even this series up 1-1, and Ike just didn't have the acceleration and the safety to get it done. And to me, it all comes down to that high main on turn 6 was the real cause for this issue.
Yeah, and I really do wonder about that, you know, that turn that we kind of cryptically talked to each other about. If Lyra had come down there instead of the Grizzly, is Bunnyhopper then obligated to trade without Lyra? Because sometimes you can ignore it. And even if the trade that happens is the kill command that was in hand at the time to snipe it out, it does still give Ike a buffer, and he would have then been incentivized to go into another 3/12, which he didn't do for the rest of the game. He didn't resurrect a 3/12 because he didn't have that good Spellstone turn because it wasn't set up well enough. So I'd like to go back and look at playing Lyra there instead of the second Witchwood Grizzly. There we go.
I think as well, for me, it's often a strategy, and you guys can try this at home if you're at the level I am, of I don't really know what my opponent's going to do, so I'm just going to play something and let them decide, and then let them make the hard choices. Does Bunnyhopper want to leave Lyra up? But then the game could just go nuts. And then, as you quite rightly said, any expenditure of resources into killing Lyra is good because you want the game to go long, as Priest specifically. So yeah, we're going to go straight into the next game.
Seamless transition, as always, Mr. Bagley.
Well, I thought you were going to give me some feedback, and then you just sat there and looked down for a bit.
I was perusing.
I feel like you're TJing me right now.
Honestly, as mean as I am to you over these years, TJ is a way bigger heel than I'll ever be.
And nobody will know it.
No, I know. He maintains this illusion of being a nice guy. Chaotic neutral, but no, he is true evil.
Or just chaotic.
Yes.
You're like, wait, what? That's not one of the options. But we are moving on to game number 3. It's all evened up. Ike locking in this Priest again, and Bunnyhopper using the Miracle deck as far as I'm concerned, at least in the way he plays it. I've had gripes about Even Paladin for a long time now. But then I watch Bunnyhopper play, and it always just drags me back in a little bit. And I'm like, stop it, Bunnyhopper. This is not good enough. So we'll see if he can pull it out of the bag now. And I feel like a bit more of a straightforward matchup, this one, because there is no Deathstalker Rexar-esque effect that can really change numbers that dramatically.
Sure. There is perhaps just in general just more big stuff that you can draw and play. And, you know, the Deathstalker Rexar idea with Hunter is that you can build the rest of your deck very lean and very fast and very kind of cheap cost cards synergizing with each other to create cool combos, because when you gas out, you have Rexar to fall back on. Other classes don't really have that luxury, so they have to build a bigger curve, right? So they're eventually drawing 6 drops and 8 drops, and that's the way that even Paladin goes about it. So they can still go very late and fight value for value against a deck like Clone Priest, but one of the big problems that this build of even Paladin now has is that they don't have the equality clears for big spellstones, etc., that are resurrected from the Priest. So Priest can certainly reach the event horizon of just too many stats on board that Paladin can't deal with it anymore.
Right, Bunnyhopper, I believe, the only player who's running 1 equality
That's right.
in the
Yeah,
list.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
so
he is playing 1.
he can create a window, but that window's pretty small, and you've got 10 seconds to crawl through it, basically, against this deck. But yeah, I was meaning more, even Paladin feels more predictable than Hunter can be with, you know, Timberwolf suddenly adding damage, kill command, and then Hyena with Rhino out of nowhere. You kind of get the gist of what the Paladin wants to do every single game. But there is the early Elemental and early Gilded Gargoyle actually looking pretty good for Ike. You could just have stuff to play that can at least beat back these 1/1s that you know your opponent's going to generate.
Yeah, a single copy of Gilded Gargoyle in Ike's deck shown up both games so far, I believe. Ike told us that Zalay was trying to convince him to play no gargoyles, but Ike, just a believer in the power of the card, just couldn't convince himself to cut them both, ended up making room for 1 in the deck.
Yeah, it's so often that the coin is just so flexible in this deck. You can coin to the big combo pieces, you can coin to buff a Spellstone, you can coin with Lyra for a literally free and kind of plus-up spell.
You can go Gargoyle on 3, coin Witchwood Grizzly against aggro.
Whether it's correct or not to run it in whatever meta, it feels good to have the coin in hand every game, or at least often. Now, I feel like the question you have to be the best at answering in Even Paladin is, what do you do with your 4-drop, or your turn 4, should I say, or your turn 3 and coin? Because already, True Silver Champion clears the board. Blessing of Kings is just a big dude that I actually can't realistically deal with that well.
Corpse Taker is Corpse Taker. Yeah.
You can save the coin and Argent Protect to hero power, trade off one of the minions. You know, the list kind of goes on, and I feel like the area surrounding turn 4 for Even Paladin really is the crutch of the deck. It really is just the thing that holds it up to the level it is now.
I'm looking at this hand, thinking that I want to play Corpse Taker and Blessing of Kings in the true intended order. Can still do that without the coin. Bunnyhopper protecting his existing 5-1 here. The Holy Smite is available. This board state would end up being a tiny bit weak to Spirit Lash, which Ike can go fishing for. There it is.
Yeah, especially with the current hand, don't see why not. Out of these selection of options here, Mind Blast doesn't have anything that really helps. And as well, the Vivid Nightmares. Okay, you could get a coin extra, but you're still getting beaten up. Yeah, Spirit Lash looks fantastic to me. And now, after seeing that, it doesn't feel like there are many punishes for just dropping Corpse Taker and saying go right now.
Oop.
And if anything, you want to play it in as large a window as possible before Psychic Scream comes out.
You do, but I think also piece by piece, Bunnyhopper's been getting a little bit of information about what cards are or are not in Ike's hand. The 2 or 3 on the left that have been hanging around for a turn or two. Because one thing he doesn't want to do is just go all in on Corpse Taker, Blessing of Kings, and then just get Shadow Word Death immediately, and he doesn't really have a board state behind that to back it up. And Ike is playing a single copy of Death, which is, again, not an automatic inclusion in this deck.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Bunnyhopper does choose to do on the following turn. Because he could just also, with 2 True Silvers in hand, as well as he does run Tyrion and a Valinir, he could just start punching him in the face with a weapon, because there isn't much punish for that. Like, there isn't the death for the weapon, right? Like, the punish directly does not exist. And you're also not overcommitting to a board where Mass Hysteria can kill this Corpse Taker, because at the moment it doesn't. And you have 3 more weapons left in the deck, effectively. Like, why not at this point?
Wow. If that isn't a signal of weakness to Bunnyhopper right now, I don't know what is. That turn was Holy Smite a 2-1, not deal with your threat, and pass.
Yeah, translated, unfun.
Yes.
For Ike, at least. Fantastic for Bunnyhopper.
So now Bunnyhopper, with that coin in Ike's hand that he got from the Gilded Gargoyle, he's now got to be thinking Psychic Scream, right? My opponent's hand is bad for turns 3, 4, and 5. He's shown me that based on his weak plays so far. So what cards can he possibly have? Big minions and Psychic Scream. So I think the equation then for Bunny is, what can I do that I'm kind of happy in forcing my opponent to Psychic Scream on the following turn? And I think exchanging 14 damage for a coin Psychic Scream is a pretty reasonable scenario for your opponent.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, and this is, you know, I hope whoever is interviewing Bunnyhopper, if he wins, we'll ask him about this, because for me, I feel like on the other side, the screen comes down, you've used the Blessing of Kings, but my worry is what's the follow-up? If you're presuming you're being screamed, what's your follow-up for Bunnyhopper now? Which is why I was honestly just heavily considering that True Silver Champion, you push 10 instead of 14, and they almost can't scream. Right, and if they do, you have Hero Power Blessing of Kings, you know, as an even bad backup. I feel like that might have been a bit over the top there from Bunnyhopper.
Bunny now is trying to solve that issue of what his reload is. Draw a second Wild Pyromancer, which does allow him to put some at least reasonable statted minions on the board and start threatening lethal again. I think he might have decided, maybe a turn too late, that it's time to giddy up with some weapon damage.
I mean, this turn's absolutely fine as well. He does have the second Pyro with that equality. I think before he drew that second Pyro, this looks a little bit worse because you really want to hold it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this would have caused Ike just a little bit more frustration if he did it the other way around.
It's a pretty miserable looking Eternal Servitude. Ike's coin Xerix next turn will find him Gilded Gargoyle, Radiant Elemental, 2 Witchwood Grizzlies.
And potential victory.
Velen, Malagos is in hand, and the Lyra. But yeah, with only 1 Radiant Elemental coming from it, I believe this is actually impossible. Unless his next draw off the top is exactly Holy Smite, and then he can loop Holy Smites forever off the Lyra.
I'll just agree.
Okay.
But also say, just as a general message, nothing's impossible. If you think like that, then, you know, what's the point? I do like these weapons start chucking away, though, and Kappa just has a second one if he really wants to equip it. The punish is just not using mana on anything that's live this turn, I guess. But there is no removal. Instead, he kind of does have available an equality anyway next turn because the Pyro is currently still alive.
Yes.
The extra mana cost of the equality is soaked into that combo because the Pyro's been played.
Right. It won't be alive against the Xerix because of the Ziliax that's going to pop out.
I'm wondering right now if Ike has any other reasonable choices. Because I think Lich King is out of the window because he can't heal as well. That's just too scary. Maybe Grizzly heal? would be considerable, but I don't think it's better than the clone, especially when you know some of the draws you can get off the top to really help with that.
Yeah.
Eternal Servitude as one of the big ones.
Sounds like dying to Equality, dying to Spellbreaker. I think Xerix was the only viable pick.
And suddenly we really get to see the difference in Equality nowadays, as opposed to pre-nerf, is that this would have opened up the Equality Pyro with the weapon as well.
Yep.
Whereas now, Bunnyhopper just can't do that.
It's a big old nerf, isn't it?
It is. Imagine, oh, saw there's a nerf coming. Oh, really? You know, what card is it? Oh, it's this card. What if they nerfed? Doubled the mana cost.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
Malagos costs 18 now.
Yeah, you'd be like, jeez. Well, you don't want us to play this card.
I like this. Maximum damage, force it through. Again, that Pyro is on board, which makes Resurrections very awkward for Ike if he's just planning on putting up a Taunt Wall here. And now by Argent protectoring the Wild Pyromancer, he also then protects it from, say, double res being a Taunt Minion and like Witchwood Grizzly and Ziliax, for example, coming off a Spellstone here for 2 minions.
Also, just a straight up Spirit Lash won't clear it off, so it
Very
would have
true.
to be like a double removal, which is just unlikely at this point.
Yep.
So we are going to see Witchwood Grizzly.
Not good enough.
Doesn't look like it to me, mainly because the weapon's going to get this stuff done. The Pyro lives anyway, so that is going to be it. And Bunnyhopper goes to a 2-1 lead over Ike. And again, Ike just couldn't get there with the Priest. It's rough.
I don't know what to tell you. This is the version of the deck that I really enjoy playing, the version of the deck that I've had the most success with, but Bunnyhopper is really picking it apart so far. I think the previous game, maybe there was a couple of flex points, a couple of decisions that might have changed the outcome for Ike. That one was just a bad draw. There was just nothing going on in the mid game for Ike. Just sat there with a handful of expensive minions. But again, that almost you have to then say is a deck building decision. He's putting more of those minions in his deck than a lot of other people are doing. You know, that Lich King that was sat in hand for Ike is something different in people's decks who have trimmed down the minion cost.
Right, and also as well, you've got to look at Bunnyhopper's equality, right? Ike has to play knowing that's a card, and not everyone plays Equality and even Paladin anymore because of the nerf, but Bunnyhopper going to show that maybe it's still just good enough. Bunnyhopper is taking the lead versus Ike 2-1, only one game away from getting a second top 4 in the championship. We're going to find out if he can do it soon. At this point, in terms of caster predictions, there's a lot of us going with Ike, but this could still get funky. If Ike loses, he is not necessarily out due to the way the tiebreakers may or may not shake out.
Yeah, and this match itself actually has a huge impact on those tiebreakers. So let's get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way while we have a moment. If you haven't been following at all, we have 3 players here who are already qualified for the World Championship through a previous seasonal championship. Those are Bunnyhopper, Viper, and Bloodyface. And depending on how many of those re-qualify in top 4, they don't just get the spot again. That doesn't make any sense. So they then get passed down to some of the other players via tiebreakers. If Bunnyhopper were to win this and take one of those top 4 spots for himself, that means we would have 3 matches of tiebreakers tomorrow after we've rounded out the tournament. If Bunny loses, we can have as few as 1. That one tiebreaker would be Yu Ying versus the loser of the game we have coming up between Roger and Definition. So this match, this game now with Bunnyhopper on a 2-1 lead, huge impact, not just in the career of these 2 players, but on the career of various other players in this tournament as well.
Yeah, it really is a big deal, and I have no doubts that all the other players in this top cut are sat with bated breath watching every single outcome of every single turn of this match as we get into game number 4. Ike on the Priest once again, and Bunnyhopper on this Pirate Miracle Rogue. I think this is a bad matchup for Ike.
It is when you get dealt the Cleef hand.
Also, just in general, double sap and a Vile Spine is gonna help.
You know what? Yeah, this deck probably wins this matchup.
But stranger things have happened. And again, we did see Bunnyhopper struggle when he couldn't activate Raiding Party, so there is definitely a moment where you can run a little bit dry on resources on the small chance that you don't get Myras or Raiding Parties active early on. We'll see how it goes so far.
Super interesting as well, by the way. Bunnyhopper actually mulligans away the Cleef hand. He throws away the prep, throws away the spell to go with it, just keeps the Van Cleef, which says to me he feels so comfortable in this matchup. He doesn't want to do anything dumb like go all in Van Cleef and then just hit that one Shadow Word Death on Ike's side and potentially throw away what is a very, very strong matchup in general.
Yeah, you really don't just, at this point, you don't really want to just get blown out by one card and then have nothing to do for the rest of the game. So, you know, he kept the Van Cleef, of course. He is on coin anyway.
Yep.
So, I actually really like this mulligan from Bunnyhopper. Ike might be making some early decisions now based on the Shadow Visions. Let's see what he gets and let's see what he goes for. Straight away goes for the death. It's like, now I don't want to be blown out by one card called Van Cleef when my opponent's on the coin.
Yes. My opponent is on coin, they kept a card, they didn't play that card on turn 1. What could that card be? It could be things like Raiding Party, or it could be Van Cleef. Those are all things that are very distinct possibilities, so Ike understands what's up. Shadow Word Death, even outside of Van Cleef, is a pretty useful card in the matchup, right? You're thinking of dealing with Captain Greenskin, who represents so much damage if it goes unchecked.
Also, Ike, pretty heavy hand in terms of just the minions that are there. Velen and Malygos in hand, which he just doesn't really want. He wants to summon those in much cheaper and more efficient ways. But the Grizzly will ask a question of Bunnyhopper, and it will probably be asked it pretty soon, as I imagine Ike is going to have to do some incredible things to not want to play that on turn 5.
Honestly, if I was queuing up against this rogue deck, and again, let me say I don't have a huge amount of experience with or against this particular rogue deck, but if you told me I had to have Mally and Velen in my hand, but in exchange I got to have a Shadow Word Pain and a Witchwood Grizzly, I think I'd probably take that exchange.
Okay. And I would, in exchange for that exchange, have 2 saps.
I don't think I'm coming out of this deal very well.
Well, that just means I've made a good deal.
It does.
So many options.
You know how Bunnyhopper handles these turns? These are normally the tricky turns. Do I dagger? Do I not? Do I go a bit heavier on the board? Do I hold the coin? All these are actually very hard questions to ask. It was one of the hardest things I found in the early days of Hearthstone, was when and how do you use that dagger that Rogue has as a hero power? It's very difficult to manage.
It does come that 6/6 Van Cleef, which means that Shadow Word Death is going to pay dividends for Ike. He can sit around, taking this little bits of chip damage, participate in this wet noodle fight for a little bit longer with these 1/2s. These aren't any great threat to him. It's when things are going to start ramping up very soon. When he starts playing his Witchwood Grizzly and it starts getting sapped, that's when he's going to know he's got a real game on his hand.
Right, luckily enough for Ike, he does have Ziliax, which is sappable, of course, but it's already done its job when you've played it, so that's absolutely fine for him. And also, we have seen, we're talking a lot about how good this Rogue is versus the Priest. If Ike gets the big Spirit Lash, well, Rogue has a finite amount of resources, especially, and they're limited, especially with the lack of Cold Bloods. So one Spirit Lash that's almost acts like a Reno in this deck a lot of the time. The hard reset might actually just push Bunnyhopper just too far away from being able to kill Ike. So it is doable. Maybe we're seeing selling this Rogue a little bit hard here, but the Priest can take this matchup and stabilize.
To me, this seems like as good a time as any to see what's up with that Witchwood Grizzly. Don't really have good Ziliax targets on the board, and it's also, crucially for me, it's a turn where you can afford to take a sap on your Witchwood Grizzly, and you're not getting punished too hard for it. It's only 4 more damage coming through.
Bear in mind as well, this Rogue deck does not run Fungal Mancer, so you are not playing into that, oh, well, he just drops Fungal and then 2-shots me. And there's Myra's. This is going to be a sick decision, though. When Bunnyhopper plays this Myra's, the puzzle box has been handed to him and he has to work it out from there, but that's all he has to work with. It's such a sick card, but can be difficult to use in situations like this when your opponent can have such a heavy amount of sustain available to them late game.
You see now, even with such a great sap target in theory in front of him, Bunnyhopper is considering, I mean, as he is wont to do, he overthinks everything, as he said himself in the break, but it's just not, it's not a fantastic sap, and I'm not actually surprised to see him try and load up more tempo. This is really one of the classic rules of playing Tempo Rogue is don't sap a minion if you're not improving your board position behind it, right? Like, sap was very early on thought to be a very bad card because you 0 for 1'd yourself. You didn't kill a card, and you killed a card from yourself by expending a sap. But then as people started to understand more about the concept of tempo in Hearthstone, people realized that if you could put a card back in your opponent's hand and develop so very aggressively behind that, you did effectively kill that card for 2 mana because you created board positions where they weren't able to just play it down again.
Yeah, you start to read sap in different ways, right? So now because this green skin's on board, say the board state exists the same on Bunnyhopper's side, the card reads 2 mana, enable X damage, which is obviously very, very important when, especially for Bunnyhopper now, he can do that twice. And does that X damage twice just kill your opponent? Well, in this deck, quite often it does.
So with that Eternal Servitude draw from Ike, I want to start getting some of my minions dead or close to dead, which in my mind incentivizes me to remove that green skin from the board, potentially using Ziliax and the trade from the Witchwood Grizzly. That leaves the Witchwood Grizzly at 3-1. Really, really, really invites Bunnyhopper to kill it instead of sapping it from the board. Same with the Ziliax, that'll be so comfortable on board. And that way you can start getting that res train going.
Yep, gone a little bit of a different route, just holding on to the Ziliax, and maybe that's just because he feels his life total is safer for now. And as you said, the sapping of the Ziliax as well isn't something that Bunnyhopper ever wants to do unless it literally creates lethal.
Yeah, well, so the reason I want to play the Ziliax with such urgency here is not because I was worried about health total from Ike, it's just because I want it in that res pool very quickly, and then I have options. Ike has options. Every time he goes for Eternal Servitude, he can choose, do I need a big taunt, or is there a nice juicy 3-3 on the board that I want to send a Ziliax into? Until the Ziliax gets played and died, he doesn't give himself those options when he does play Eternal Servitude.
Right. Part of me wondered whether he was going to Shadow Word Pain the Bear after the hit into the green skin, to be completely honest. So I was going to bring it up, but I do often restrain myself as to what stupid plays I suggest.
That's genius!
Can't zap it if it's dead. It's Ike level thing.
Choose soon.
When kill it so it's dead goes too far.
Already you start to see just like the crazy levels of damage output you can
Right.
get out of nowhere. And there's not even been a raiding party. Obviously, he does have green skin, but there's no Shadow Blade's been played yet, which is normally a huge source of damage in itself. And next turn, it's potentially likely that Bunnyhopper can just Myra's into lethal.
Yeah, and I think that's what that turn was
it's
about.
like,
You
it's
saw
really
kind of
good.
an Eviscerate just very recklessly thrown away at the face, but that's a card out of his hand that then gets replaced by a different card when he Myras. You know, he replaces those resources later on. Now Ziliax does come down from Ike, and Bunnyhopper again. I mean, Bunnyhopper, I mean, Backstab's great, don't get me wrong, it's a great answer to Ziliax, but the one way, when you're playing an aggro deck against this matchup, the one thing you fear is just Ziliax in the res pool. It's just so difficult to deal with.
Right, but what I'm thinking right now is that Backstab enables Bunnyhopper 1-2 Myras, which I think is 100% correct here. Look at the buffs on the weapons, which is insane. It means he can play the Dreadsail Corsair, and then also he has Sap and Vile Spine next turn.
Does he need to play the Corsair? He just killed a Lyra. It's a nice juicy target for the Lyra to go into, so let's see if he has lethal through
Ziliax.
the... Sorry, yeah, you're right, the Ziliax. So if the Ziliax comes down, Ike would heal back up to 12, and then with a 6 attack dagger, 8, 9... Yeah, okay, he has lethal through that happening anyway. Does he have lethal through 2 of them, though? That's the scary part now. Double Servitude, bringing back the double Ziliax.
He does have Leroy, Deckhand, Sap. He has Prep as well, which is going to help just get that Sap off maybe a little bit easier. Wait, no, wait. So we can Leroy, Prep, Sap, Vile Spine. That's lethal, right?
Leroy
sorry,
Spine is 10 mana.
I keep thinking he's on 10. I apologize. Take it all back.
So you can go Prep, Sap, Vile Spine, South Sea Deckhand. Prep doesn't even do anything there.
Well, you want to play Hench Clan, right?
Well, I mean, not if you're directly just looking for lethal. I'm still fishing for lethal.
Nah, I've stopped fishing.
Okay.
I'm not caught anything, and I'm going home.
Right.
Ordering a takeaway instead.
Sap one, deckhand the other. He goes to 16, and then you have Leroy plus 6, 12, 13, 15. I found 15, I think.
I don't think he can prep Sap Foulspine. He knows the Grizzly's in hand.
That's true.
How does he punch through a Grizzly?
Well, I mean, if he was going to get direct lethal.
Oh,
then,
yeah.
Sure.
Sorry. I'm saying, like, as we now play the game.
I think I found one off by healing him back up to 16 and then dealing 15. But one off is very much not good enough.
The big question of Myra's, is it enough? Radiant Party, a big whip on that draw as well. Radiant Party just does nothing. So that's a -1 card. Ike's going down
Spirit
to 9.
Lash. Ike needs Spirit Lash.
Didn't look like one to me, but was it pain? Oh, it was death. So that is a fresh dagger, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's just a 1-attack dagger before anyone gets any crazy ideas. But already that's what, 11 is available, and he can heal up to 11.
Can heal to 13 with the Vellum.
But doesn't gain the taunt. Which we know is better.
Yes. It appears Ike does as well.
Wow, such a heads-up play. Oh my, that is impressive.
And now this is scary because, again, Bunnyhopper wants to deal with this. He doesn't want to put damage into it, but he doesn't also want to sap it because, he knows the Witchwood Grizzly is there.
Does sapping it playing the Hench Clan make the numbers add up better? So if he saps it, plays Hench Clan, he has 3 cards, so Grizzly will be 9.
3/9.
He has... And then he can only get Leroy
9
through.
would go through, Leroy would connect, yeah.
Options.
Wait. No, is that enough with the double Hench Clan buff over 2 turns?
Well, Ike would also be able to... I mean, okay, from Bunnyhopper's perspective, there's one in hand, but Ike can play 2.
Right, yeah, sure. But also Ike heals, so the daggers get completely negated, but then re-added to the Hench Clan.
This is on a razor's edge right now. If this Velen's left alive, Ike has game-winning draws from the top of his deck.
Does he? I'm trying to work out. There's so many weird things. Like, does he have a Leroy now and ping the 2 dragons with the 1/2 and the dagger?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think this is the best chance you give yourself because you push 6 and then have 6 to help with the Grizzly that you know is there. And then you push 4, 5, 6, you push 7 next turn through this.
But there's 2 of them.
Yes. Also, the Grizzlies on way more health as well.
Yep. Bunnyhopper, he understands that is going to lock him out, and Ike in a game that went all the way down to the finest of margins. The Witchwood Grizzlies, the Ike special, the single inclusion, the one player that's bringing those minions to this tournament. They show their anti-aggro power. They're even pushing through multiple saps. Raymond, I have a question. If this rogue deck, drawing double sap, Edwin Van Cleef on coin, cannot beat that priest, why is it here?
Because it did not draw Veldorei Striders or a Shadow Blade.
How many cards does it need to win a game of Hearthstone?
It runs Myra's, which equals all of them.
Okay.
But no, that was a very impressive hold there and some just nice heads-up play. I think there would have been a temptation of maybe a lesser player to just Grizzly again instead of the Velen heal turn, which put Bunnyhopper in such an awkward spot. Do I kill Velen? Do I sap? If I sap, this leads to one Grizzly, so on, so on, so on, so on.
Yep.
Because also as well, Bunnyhopper had to be conscious of Spellstones at that point. You know, even although it would have been a roundabout way with the fatigue, like even Scream. You know, what happens if something gets screamed? There were a lot of what ifs. But anyway, that's for then. This is for now. Even Warlock versus the Pirate Rogue. It's all coming down to this. Ike playing for a guaranteed spot at the World Championship.
2 games to 2, game 5. So the quick refresher course again. If Ike wins this, then we're going to have one potential tiebreaker spot to play for, and that will be between Yu Ying and the loser of Definition and Roger coming up tomorrow. If Bunnyhopper wins, there can be as many as 3 players still playing out for that last spot, and we enter the chaos realm of just all things going wild on Sunday as we try and sort it all out.
Yeah, Sunday could potentially be very wacky, and this tournament's been wacky enough for me, but let's see what happens. Ike with the Mountain Giant, this is post-Mulligan. And also as well, you know what, it's kind of weird coming from the even lot, but the Doomsayer is definitely not a bad card in this matchup. You can negate, say, you know, an early Van Cleef if you're worried about that, or, you know, a potential turn where your opponent may try and play a green skin when you know they have it, or potentially have it from Raiding Party. But there's the Feldorei Strider, which is just such a great card to just have on curve. Just play the 4-drop. Maybe you get some spiders next time.
Yeah, and Hench Clan behind that as well. The Hench Clan Feldorei Strider curve really makes missing your early curve and daggering on 2 seem pretty reasonable, honestly.
Yeah. Well, look at it this way. I don't count deckhands as true 1-drops in this deck, as in turn 1 plays. It only runs Firefly, so it's not trying to have always a consistent strong turn 1, but it's the turn 2 to 5 that really is the power creep turn for this deck, especially if you can proc a Raiding Party. The old prep Raiding Party turn is magnificent.
There is the dagger on 2. It's going to be met by potentially a Doomsayer on 2 from Ike, though.
Also as well, I will say the whole dagger Shadow Blade interaction's kind of awkward sometimes. It's like, when do I squeeze the Shadow Blade in when you have a hand like this? Like, do you want it earlier? Do you want to save it till later on?
Ike now assuming the position. Frodan called it giving himself a head massage or some... I don't know what he was talking about.
I often don't myself.
So many possibilities.
Tough call, all right, because if you Doomsayer, you're not accelerating to that ridiculous Mountain Giant turn.
It's true. He did draw Drake, though, which does give him the ability to coin it out on a nice empty board. Take control of the situation. Will challenge the on-curve play that will then come out from Bunnyhopper, which would be that Feldorei Strider coming back the other side. Ike's going to turn it down, though.
Well, my question is...
Ooh, second Doomsayer as well.
Oh, that Eviscerate's pretty sick. I wonder if Ike ever deviates from the baseline Giant on 3 plan. Actually, maybe double Doomsayers here, I don't know. Maybe that's too faithful. But I look at this Eviscerate and say, well, prep, Evis, and Feldorei to kill the Giant is very, very good for Bunnyhopper right now, if that's the route Ike chooses to take.
Yeah.
And you can't even blame him for it, but Giant on 3 is just good.
And I kind of mocked the comparisons to Miracle Rogue earlier, but this is Miracle Rogue 101. Play your biggest minion, prep a spell, and kill their biggest minion. That is how Miracle Rogue operated for a serious amount of time throughout their various... Wow, he's going double Doomsayer!
This is... Oh, I don't know. Me and Ike, same wavelength.
I feel like he ends up with a Twilight Drake on the board here at the cost of his coin and 2 Doomsayers instead of using a coin and 1 Doomsayer.
True, but that opened up worlds where he could have had a Giant on an empty board.
If the play wasn't so aggressive from his opponent, sure. All right,
you know, I think this is a reasonable middle ground because the Giant can just run away with the game, right? Because also, if your opponent saps it, well, they're doing nothing else.
Right.
And then you just replay the Giant.
I'm really trying to cleanse caster vision from my mind, which is such a hard thing to do.
Hardest part of our job,
because when I
100%.
was suggesting Doomsayer on 2, obviously I'm looking at Hench Clan Thug, but to me this does seem like a little bit of wasted resources to get to the same point, but I do take your argument that it allowed him to be a bit more reactive to what Bunnyhopper was about to do, which when you're playing the control deck in a matchup, quite often that is what you're supposed to do. Just react correctly to what your opponent does.
That's the trade-off, right? The second there isn't the aggressive opening. You've got a Mountain Giant against Miracle Rogue, like, great. But yeah, we did see the Shadow Blade getting activated there, and also there is the Raiding Party in hand that Bunnyhopper can prep for 0 mana whenever he wants. He could generate this Captain Greenskin, and I would not be surprised if that was the play, at least to start the turn. He can bail out and play Feldorei Strider. Worst case scenario. Best case scenario, he gets a 4-2 weapon and a 5-4 on the board.
That 5-4 on the board does not really get too much work done, though.
No, but the 4-2 weapon nearly kills your opponent with Leroy in hand. Andy Dread Corsairs!
The Dread Corsair.
It's so
The Dread
subtle.
Corsair
Welcome
changes
to the
everything.
school of this pirate rogue.
Oh yeah, it's only taken like 15 games this tournament to do something impressive.
Yeah, that was the entry exam. to pass to get in, and now you're in, we can start teaching you the deck.
Fair enough.
And this, especially from our point of view, is looking grim for Ike.
It is.
He can wreck the weapon, but it's the lack of follow-up from that, which is the true problem here.
I wonder.
Leroy and Eviscerate in hand, as you pointed out. Not enough mana to use both on the following turn. I believe if Ike just goes Ooze here and trades through the 3-3 at Southsea Deckhand, draw would be... No, he wouldn't have the dagger up to make the Deckhand charge. So he would be safe from Leroy lethals.
Yeah, he'd be one off with the weapon Eviscerate, right?
Almost out of time.
12?
Shadowblade Abyss?
Yeah.
Yeah, 12.
So many possibilities.
Your magic shall not
Spellbreaker. Gonna take as much damage off the board as possible. So that is what...
7 in play.
Yeah, looks
Leroy
like it adds
in
up to me.
hand. Ike shakes his head. He takes 13 from the Leroy and the existing damage. You've got to potentially ask the question of that Doomsayer decision. It was really the only choice he had in the matchup. How much could it have changed things if he'd have prevented that Hench Clan Thug coming down preemptively and saved himself some of that early damage? We'll never know. Unfortunately, we can't just sandbox it out and find out.
Maybe one day.
Give us a Hearthstone sandbox. Yes. He's so good.
But yeah, we see the hug there from Ike to Bunnyhopper, and you know, it's a shame for Ike, but because of strange things, Ike is not necessarily out of the tournament yet. But huge congratulations to Bunnyhopper. He's excelled all tournament. He got the job done, and once again is top 4 of the championship, and it's just extremely, extremely impressive. There is a reason when we interviewed a lot of the players here and we asked them who they thought the best player in the world was, a fair chunk of them said Bunnyhopper.
Yeah, he's just an anomaly. He really is. And the problem
He's
is
too good at stuff.
Him, Bloodyface, Viper, you know, Hunter Ace, Saiyan, all of these players that have done ridiculously consistent things, they're all anomalies. If you ask people who say that that shouldn't be able to happen, well, when that many people can do it, just goes to show that hard work, talent, skill, dedication, practice, all these things pay off and just make you a phenomenal Hearthstone player.
Couldn't agree more, but let's check in with Bunnyhopper to see what he has to say about that match.